Well, hello, I'm Jay Strack, and I want to welcome you once again to all of you that are watching, or maybe you're on a treadmill and you're listening, but I want to welcome you to There's Always a Way podcast. And as I try to do, I want to introduce you to people that I know and have found to be fascinating, interesting, convicting, challenging, provocative, but yet at the same time, in a sense, asking me to do some things that I never felt comfortable doing, but kind of knew I needed to do. So when I think of leadership, when I think of a couple buzzwords for podcasts today: transition, succession, sustainability. Whatever business, whatever field, whatever service you're in, I promise you those three terms are something you're going to have to come to grapple with if you're a leader. And so my guest today, Dr. Ronnie Floyd, who is the executive director of the Southern Baptist Convention. Man, that's a mouthful. And Dr. Floyd, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Jay. It really does mean a lot to me that you've asked me, because you have had some extraordinary leaders be interviewed, and I'm not worthy of even the possibility. But, I just want to tell everyone today, I'm a chronic listener of this podcast every week. I listen to it while I'm on a run, and, it's just blessed me greatly and took me up. And so thanks for contributing to my leadership.
Well, wow, Ronnie. Well, thank you for that more than you know. Ronnie, we've known each other a long time, and you're one of those who have left fingerprints, in a good sense, on my life, on my ministry, my calling. There have been a couple of times, just for our full disclosure with our listeners, when I was in the valley of decision about a new idea, a new project, even though I was being true to my calling, but it was going to look a whole lot different. There have been several times in my life when I'd pick up the phone and make a call to bounce the idea off of, and ask for prayer and ask for wisdom. And that call was to you. So you've been there several times, critical times. So when was going through transition, when I struggled with succession, when I would think long-term about sustainability, what we're doing, will it last? Because we know if it's eternal, we're on kingdom business. We're trying to do meaningful things. It's supposed to last. And so I want to thank you for being that point person for me at a lot of different intersections in my life. I do. My favorite one, I think, is when I was about to make one of the scariest decisions, get involved with a lot of corporate things, business things, NASA, Disney, and a dream I had to do something epic. And I knew I was really getting out there on the high dive. And you suggested a fast. And somehow I got talked into, or encouraged, I should say, to a 40-day fast. And I remember several times on the road when you would go, well, dummy, you're not supposed to be maintaining a full schedule, crusade schedule, speaking 7 times a day in high schools and preaching at night. But you walked me through something spiritually that I knew I needed to do. It was biblical. You walked me through that. But my favorite moment is when I called you. I said, man, Ronnie, I got 1 day to go. He said, no. You said, are you ready now? Because, Jay, we got to think through what your next steps are. I said, oh man, listen, the minute I get through with the service, I'm headed to Western Sizzler. I think it was called Western Sizzling, or, a steakhouse. And I said, man, I'm going to get these 2 steaks and a bacon. And you're going on the other end. No, you don't do that. You'll end up in the emergency room. So that's the kind of wisdom I want all our listeners to know that I've gotten from you, talking me into a 40-day fast and then robbing me of that big, thick steak at the end of a 40-day fast.
Yeah, I saved your life.
Well, there's more times than one, but we can't talk about it. We have to stay focused. All right, Dr. Floyd, let me ask you a couple questions. Of all you've listened, you graciously encourage folks to listen to the podcast and listen to more than one. But I want to ask, having listened, that I always begin by asking people that I know are well educated. I know they're very experienced. I know they've show outstanding leadership. But I'm always fascinated by, even though we're from many different disciplines and fields, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the phrase, there's always a way?
Well, Jay, to me, I think of the words from the Bible, and I think of these words that nothing is impossible with God. That's what I think of. And I think of this phrase that the Lord gave me about 25 years ago. God can do more in a moment than I can ever do in a lifetime. And wherever we are today in our lives, I mean, with the power of God, with the intervention of God, God is able to create a pathway of deep faith and commitment in the midst of crisis. And when we think it's dark, I mean, his light can shine. And I'm always remembering most days of my life that thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light for my path. And I think that we have got to constantly go to the Bible, constantly say, Lord, speak to me. And when you do that, you will always show up with faith in the word and in God that there is always a way.
Wow. Now, Ronnie, Dr. Floyd, we first met when you were in Nederland, Texas. I was doing a crusade in Beaumont, Texas. And by the way, I also did a huge area-wide inviter, Texas, but anyway, you were pastoring in that community, young guy. We were both just getting started, but God had already given you favor in that community. Yeah. So I want to ask you, I came to faith a little later in the process. I was 17. I only have one talent, and that's a big mouth. So I give the Lord all the credit for it, even if he doesn't want it, all the credit for my big mouth. But you were at a young age pastoring and leading and becoming a real influence in that whole part of the state of Texas. And then you moved from there, and I may be leaving out a step or two, but then you went to Springdale, Arkansas. And what happened there is historic. One of the single greatest examples I've ever seen, that I've read about, that I know to be true, of real growth, real evangelism, real vision. I mean, it was one of those lasting, incredible works. But Ronnie, tell us a little bit about your call, because you've done several things in your life, but yet you've stayed, as Eugene Peterson said, a long obedience in the same direction. And it's interesting, you can answer the call and still be going, different calls, and still be going in the same direction.
Yeah, Jay, once I came to Christ, all along, I had intent and a real commitment to be a high school football coach, a college football coach, and a pro football coach. I loved the game, and that's where I was going by path, and I was extremely deliberate about it. I felt like one day I could take over the University of Texas and do that well, and then go to the Dallas Cowboys and hopefully do that well. Well, all of a sudden, God called me into the ministry, and obviously that dream had to die, and it did. And so, I pastored some in Texas after I graduated from college and seminary, went to Southwestern Seminary, did 2 degrees there, and pastored while I was doing that. And then, we ended up in Beaumont, Port Arthur, Texas, down in Nederland, Texas, where I served. And the church just really did well in those 26 months. And all of a sudden, the Lord started bringing opportunities to me, and I didn't know what to do because I wasn't used to that. And but God's favor was heavy, and He placed me in Northwest Arkansas, which is basically the home of the University of Arkansas, Walmart, J.B. Hunt Transport, and Tyson Foods, which is the largest beef and poultry producer in the world. And so those four megapolises as businesses ended up extremely successful. When we went, I mean, I was a kid preacher, and we went, I mean, you know, they were on the go, but I mean, those years I was there, I mean, you talk about flourishing. I mean, just flourishing, and the whole area blew up. And I remember driving around that when I was there initially. I thought, my goodness, where in the world are the people? You know, where are the buildings? Well, now you can pretty well find anything you want in Northwest Arkansas, and it is a thriving, dominant, small metroplex, metropolitan area of about 500,000 people now in that 2-county area. And while you would know this well, while even those are small numbers compared to major cities, the power of influence in that region is just mega. It's amazing. And I was able to lock in with all that. And God, you know, God put His favor and gave me access to do things I would have never been able to do. I learned a lot about leadership. I think about one of your books about everything I learned about leadership I learned in Florida or whatever. You did
Right.
a series like that, and I've always thought that's exactly what I did in Northwest Arkansas. Everything I ever learned about leadership, I learned right there because I observed, I knew them. I had relationships with them. Some of them went to my church, and I learned so many great truths. And so the Lord just blew up the church. I mean, it just swelled and kept on swelling. And, you know, we ran several thousand people a week and had 4 campuses when I left, and the whole region transitioned, and God's favor was there. And the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is the same reason I went to that church initially, and that was the call of God. And the call of God is critical in our lives, no matter whether we're lay people or we're people like us, ministers of the gospel. I mean, if the Lord calls, then the answer has to be yes. So the Lord flourished that ministry, Jay, and to God's glory. I mean, it's just a story that quite honestly, our phrase was, the miracle continues. And that's what we saw unfold. The miracle continues. The great news, Jay, is the church was great before I got there, but the church just went. I mean, right time, right place, right leader, right moments, right opportunities. And now, you know, that region has about 1,400 to 1,600 other businesses that have presence in Northwest Arkansas, from a small group of 5 or 10 of their best people to take care of their best account, called Walmart, all the way up to several hundred. And so, you know, the area is full of leaders. It's just impacted with leaders. And I had the privilege to pour into their lives and learn from them. And hopefully along the way, I taught them the Bible and taught them how to walk with God.
Wow, Ronnie. Well, I've been privileged to have been at Springdale and then the Church of the Cross, and but that whole through almost every phase. My standard line whenever somebody asks me about Ronnie Floyd, I would say all I know is they've reached more people than have ever lived in the entire state of Arkansas. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? They're just always talking numbers? I'm going, no. Every time I go there, whether it's to a part of a program, or I'm privileged to get to speak, or just passing through, I watch this amazing thing happen. People come from all over the country. Families bring all their family, but there was such an excitement. It was pulsating with life. And Ronnie, I remember working on that book, Everything Worth Knowing I Learned Growing Up in Florida, and I never will forget. You went, well, I said, you said, well, man, Jay, if that goes well, what are you gonna do? I said, well, man, I plan on doing everything I needed to know, about success I learned in Texas, and then every California dreaming. And you said, well, man, well, what about, you've got to write about Arkansas. I said, what? I said, dude, I thought I was the one that took a lot of drugs. What do you mean you got to ride? You said, get in the car. And you drove me around, and there was Walmart. And by the way, Walmart was a big deal, but it wasn't like it was on the way to being what it is today. Tyson Food, big deal. I mean, it was huge. And Ronnie, and of course, J.B. Hunt, and even it's the Arkansas Razorbacks. So being a Gator, I have to, kind of move through that part quickly. But it's one of the most amazing places on the planet. And I want to ask you, Ronnie, simultaneously, how do you learn and benefit being in that environment and being around those individuals, and yet at the same time be investing in them, leading them, and motivating them? I mean, it's not like, you spent 6, 7, 10 years learning and then you began. It's like the Lord gave you that connection, right, that favor. But are there a couple things you did to help you grow in that leadership capacity? Was it osmosis or combination?
Well, I believe what happened, first of all, I have the spiritual gift of leadership, so I'm drawn to talk about the subject. I'm motivated to talk about the subject. Also, I was a student of the subject, and was learning from some of the greatest, including your friend of mine, John Maxwell, and numerous other people, including you. And so with that, I was just an eager learner. And really, Jay, I think it comes back to my walk with Christ. That's really important to me, and I've developed that deeply over the years, because I think one of the real things people need to learn in today's world is that one of the greatest marks of being filled with the Holy Spirit is being teachable. And I've always tried to be teachable. And so I've operated like that. So when I would go out with a leader, I wasn't looking for him to do anything for me. And that's the thing about it. Most pastors say, how do you reach people and enter their lives? Stop trying to get them to do something for you. Just pour your life in them. Get to know them. Go to ball games with them. Experience life with them outside the church as well as inside the church. And, as God began to anoint, all these leaders started coming. When we started our Pinnacle Hills campus, as you well know, we started that just 2 weeks before 9/11. 2 weeks after 9/11, already planned, I started what is called, and it still exists today, Jay, which is hard to believe.
Wow.
The Northwest Arkansas Business Person Summit. And that began with me investing in business leaders every Thursday for about 24 weeks a year. And I was teaching them, and I didn't teach them the Bible. I talked to them about leadership, taught them principles.
Sunday school. It wasn't a Sunday school class.
I never opened the Bible with them because they were, I'm trying to reach lost people that never met Jesus. And so we encourage them. I mean, we had over 70% of the people that came to that the first year were not even members of our church. They had no affiliation. Many of them just people that had no understanding of God at all, but they were eager to learn leadership. The thing started blowing up after a couple of years, and I was also teaching the football coaches at the University of Arkansas for 5 years. And so, plus I'm preaching on Sunday 3 or 4 times at 2 campuses. I finally had to give up something, and I started bringing in leaders from across America to build the Northwest Arkansas Business Person Summit. We started with a couple of hundred, and that thing's still going today, but it literally is operating today, and they'll average over 300 in a semester. And that is just remarkable. And we've had days where we've had 500 people, 800 people. And I've interviewed some of the greatest leaders in the world. I'd bring them in and interview them. Some of them who were very gifted, they would speak. I mean, I've interviewed the president of Walmart, I interviewed J.B. Hunt, I've interviewed all kind of people, the head of the Ritz-Carlton. I mean, you know, all kind of people, exposing those people. Well, when you pour into people, then all of a sudden they're going to say, you know what they're doing, maybe it's real. And so they started coming, and they started responding in a way, man, I got a problem. I got to have somebody to talk to. So, you know, man, we just have, I forgot how many thousands of that. They did a thing before I left the Cross Church of how many thousands of people were unique people that had been to one of the Northwest Arkansas Business Person Summits. It's amazing. I mean, just multiple thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And they're business leaders, not church leaders. I mean, in real life, men, women, from the presidents of corporations would sit there all the way to, you know, the guy who is on manual labor, who heard about it, and he wants to come there for lunch and listen. So everybody.
I remember meeting Donnie Smith.
Yeah.
And then I remember meeting Mr. Sutterquist, you know, and of course, Donnie Smith, Tyson Foods International, and Sutterquist, of course, were all Walmart, and went on to do a lot of leadership things himself. And at the same time, meeting them, guy who brought 5 people of his lawn care service, 5 of his employees,
right.
And he brought them up and introduced me to them. I mean, you know, brought them up to me, and we talked. And I thought, you know, that's what makes this thing so unique, is you're investing in, and it was aimed at those men and women in leadership. And it's remarkable. I want to ask you, Ronnie, I do believe vision attracts reality, and I do believe eagles attract eagles. And I know every pastor, I know every youth pastor, I know educators trying to attract the right team. I know businessmen and women, but eagles attract eagles. Now, Ronnie, I know you're one of those that I can use this term with. You have a sense of humility about yourself, and you're always amazed at what all God does through you and with you. And that's one of my favorite things about you. But without putting you on the spot, but how would you answer that as somebody who's watched a lot of eagles gather? How can we become an eagle? I don't even, there might probably a better way to phrase that, but how do we become an eagle so that we can attract eagles?
Well, that's a great question. I certainly don't have all the ingredients to that makes a formula that somebody can take. I do think it comes back to this, Jay. I think everyone needs to be healthy spiritually. You're going to lead out of how your spiritual life is. Every decision you make is going to be impacted by your spiritual life, one way or the other. And so it starts with being healthy spiritually. I think it's important to be healthy physically, doing the very best you can, you know, and every day, at some point in your day, you know, try to build in exercise, even if it's, you know, 25 minutes of walk, or 25-minute run, or, you know, that kind of a thing. And in the podcast world today, quite honestly, that's where I'm nourished. I'll go out for an hour run somewhere. And, you know, I'm going to listen to a couple of podcasts. I'm pouring into my life as a leader and all. So you need to be healthy physically at whatever level that is for you. You can't compare yourself to anybody else. You only have your body. So everybody's got to remember that. But you need to work on simply getting out energy, creating energy in your life. I think we need to be healthy in relationship to emotionally, because so many people are unhealthy emotionally. You know, certain things are happening and it's just not ticking right. And that comes back to being healthy relationally. I'm just telling you, man, people are emotionally driven because relationships drain them. How many people do you hang around that refresh you in relationships versus how many drain you in relationships? That is very, very important. I mean, I like to be around people that refresh me. I mean, you're a great refresher in my life, honestly. I mean, we'll get together, we'll talk on the phone, and we're going to laugh, and you're going to give me an idea about something, and you know, I'm probably calling you for a purpose, or you're calling me for a purpose, and you know, a lot of that. But I mean, I have those other people in my life that refresh me. They make me enjoy life when I'm pretty tense normally, and hopefully I can help refresh some people. So I think you got to be healthy in those areas. And you know, so often leaders think, especially Christian leaders, all right, business world, educational world, even in government, Christian leaders and church people. I mean, all that. When you're a Christian leader, oftentimes you say, well, I'm healthy. I'm walking with the Lord. You know, God is on my life. I sense the Lord's presence and power in my life. Well, listen, that's fine, but that's one area. If you're healthy, if you're not healthy relationally, or you just don't feel well physically, it's going to affect everything in your life. And so, you know, and then all of a sudden you're drained and you explode over the wrong things, or you make the wrong decision because you were too impulsive and not being proactive in your decision making. You became reactive and you weren't ready. You just weren't ready and you made a bad decision. Well, we've all made bad decisions. And, you know, that's part of life. And so we have to grow from those decisions. And I think all of that builds within me. Eagles want to learn from eagles, you know, and doesn't matter what level of leadership you have, you want to be a learner. I am a learner. I am a chronic learner. And we have to understand the power of learning from others.
Wow. Well, Ronnie, I do believe that the single greatest leadership trait we can learn is the ability to build meaningful, lasting, positive relationships.
Right.
And we live in a day and age where everybody kind of, what have you done for me lately? Or how can I use somebody? And then in the social media world, we could talk all day about that, but there's just not the emphasis, at least maybe I'm old school now, but still incredibly cool, he quickly added. But I want you to know, I mean, I just struggle with seeing so many gifted and bright, and you want to say, man, don't walk off from that person. Man, slow down, hang out a little bit, be accessible. And I think, Ronnie, one of my favorite things, and I have down to talk to you about a couple of things, and we've touched on them, but spiritual disciplines, I know you stress those, and you really do live by those. But I watch, and I'm more fascinated by daily rituals. You know, there's a book Donald Rumsfeld wrote called Rumsfeld's Rules, where he's collected insights and aha moments or quotes for 50 years. And, you know, he served in umpteen administrations, et cetera. But I never will forget, he said one of the single best pieces of advice he was ever given was in the Oval Office by Patrick Moynihan, who is a Democrat, obviously, and Rumsfeld, pretty much a Republican, I think safe to say, very conservative. And he said to him, Rummy, always just buy black nylon socks. And here's Rumsfeld, they're talking about, you know, World War something and an economic plan and advising the president. And he said, because you can wear those socks with anything. And so Rumsfeld saved that. And he wrote up about 5 pages on the fact that when you're living a hectic life or a busy life, if you can have something, pretty basic things already in place that you don't have to think about. And after all, that black socks go with anything. So, I mean, you know, I don't know about sneakers and shorts. We have folks from up north that wear that down here, and that's a fashion felony. But besides that, but I've been just amazed at sometimes the simple things that really can just help put some order and structure into all the craziness going on, especially if you're highly motivated. What are a
Right.
couple daily rituals, Ronnie, that are chiseled in stone in the Floyd household?
Sure. Well, I can begin with the first one because they doesn't matter what I've done. I've always lived this since my later teen years. I had a guy tell me one time in my freshman year of college, I was sitting with this great preacher, and late one night, Manly Beasley Jr. and I were in conversation with this leader. And we asked that leader, I said, listen, before we go, I said, if there's anything, one thing you'd tell this young preacher where he can really make an impact in his life, what would that be? Man did not hesitate. He said, Ronnie, if you will learn to give the first hour of every day of your life to God, there's no telling what God will do with you. You know, I was young. I was somewhat dumb, but I started that discipline immediately. And all these years, that's been my number one thing when I get up in the morning. Doesn't matter how early the flight is. Doesn't matter what else is happening. There's just discipline in doing that. And so, you know, that doesn't matter where I am. That principle is going to take place in my life. The second thing I would say is just having order as much as possible. Now, everybody has to understand I'm in a new role as of 14 months ago. I was a long-term senior pastor of a large multi-campus church in Northwest Arkansas for 32 years and 7 months. I miss it direly and daily. I'm in a life of 180 degrees, providing day-to-day leadership as the president and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee, which takes care of all of our convention activities outside of when we meet in person 2 times a year, or really 1 time a year for 2 days.
Right.
And so now my whole track has changed. But when I was a pastor, you know, I gave my mornings to God. And I gave my mornings to study, to meditation, after my time with the Lord. And I literally didn't ever have an appointment for over 30 years before 11:30 in the morning with publicly. Now, I had a lot going on in between that span of time, several hours. But the point is that was a discipline. And then I entered into all the relational dynamics. But I was ready. Rushing out of the house, going to do this, going to do that is not always the wisest thing. Now today in my life, you know, it's more of a corporate setting in some ways, even though it's not corporate. I have people that depend on me in a different way because I don't have as large of a staff team, but the assignments are big.
Massive.
The expectations are beyond what any man can accomplish.
It's only the largest Protestant denomination in the world.
That's correct. In a very difficult season in America, across the world, with the most amazing missionary force all over the world. And people say, well, how did you leave what you were doing at your age to do this? There's only one answer: calling. I would have never done this. And trust me, if I had not been called, then the calling here or the decision to come here could not keep me. But the calling that called me here is the calling that keeps me here presently to the glory of God. And hopefully I can make a difference to be sure that we do everything we can, that every person will be introduced to Jesus Christ in every town, every city, every state, and every nation. And that's what I get up burning with every day in my life. And so I try to live a disciplined life from the time I get up until the time I go to bed. And and I know this, Jay, because you're an empty nester like I am. Life changes along the way.
Yes, sir.
And if you're not careful, once your kids are all gone, all you're going to ever do is work. You're always going to have a computer in front of you, an iPhone in front of you, something you got to get done. There's pressing stuff happening. So, there has to be a time when you try to back away and you get rest and enjoy a few things in life. And so I'm grateful for the Lord's blessing upon our lives.
Ronnie, you touched on it by your heartbeat and your passion, but I know we have a lot of sharp, gifted young men and women that are really struggling with, do I want to fool with so many demands on my time and so many other things, networks, but how important, what do you say to our millennial leaders? And I'm talking about some significant individuals, and you know them well, but what do we say to them that would help them see the value? Because we've both devoted a pretty good section of our life to doing things that we were hoping would make our convention better and stronger.
Sure.
Even making some unpopular stands at the time, and even being those saying we've got to make some changes. Yeah. But what do you say, Ronnie, as this leader who's seeing everything you see from your vantage point, but having been the guy who's climbed up the ranks, what do you say about why the denomination matters?
Well, this could pertain to anything anyone's a part of. But why does a denomination matter? Why does a network of church matters? I think it all comes back to one thing: what's going to drive you? If the goal is to, do this or that, and not Jesus's goal, then we got a problem. So the thing that always drove me and still drives me is the Great Commission. When you believe right, and when you really believe what we, as you well know, we have a faith, a faith belief system. We're a confessional group that believes deeply in what we categorize within our denomination, and every denomination has them to some degree. For us, it's the Baptist faith and message. And so that if you will identify where you are biblically, then you're going to end up going, if that is a correct way to look at the Bible, you're going to end up wanting to go to take the gospel to the nations and to disciple people and encourage people to move toward that end. And Jay, I mean, we have a lot of challenges. Every denomination, every business, no matter what you are, we're in insurmountable challenges day to day. Some days I get up and I think, man, it's Mount Everest here, it's Mount Everest here, it's Mount Everest here. And so, rather than giving up, you've got to drive it back. What is the purpose? Well, our purpose is to present the gospel of Jesus Christ to every person in the world and to make disciples of all the nations. Our purpose is to give good news to the whole world. Our purpose is to share Jesus with every person in every town, every city, every state, and every nation. And there's got to be something driving you beyond your ego, beyond what's convenient to you. And we can do more together than we can ever do alone. I mean, there are 47,500 churches that are a part of our family of churches, some 51,000 plus congregations. Well, listen, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have one of the largest, if not the largest, mission force all over the world, here in America and across the world. We have not brought home one missionary yet due to a lack of funding. God is providing. You see, and the point is that my point in all that is when you drive things with a mission heart, whatever you want your mission to be, you may be a non-Christian and that doesn't drive you. Well, whatever drives you, that's got to be what you come back to. I would encourage you to enter the family and to become a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ. But listen, it's all about what the goal is. I mean, you do that through Student Leadership University, for example, you and your amazing team, and you pour into leaders You put principles in their life. You challenge them intellectually, but you're always driving them ultimately to a goal. You got to live your life to glorify God, and you got to do what really counts in your life, and what you're good at and gifted at. That's where I've always tried to live. And, you know, I'm in the biggest test of my life, professionally. And so, but I'm telling you, it's the only way I can do it is to just keep that always important in my mind. And Jay, it's the same thing, no matter whether we're, you know, in government, why should we be involved in certain elements of the politic area of the country? Why should we do this? I'm just going to give up. I don't need all that. Hey, listen, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. And we've all got to be involved in all areas whereby I love what our friend, again, we quote, and you're a lot closer a friend of his than mine, but because you touch base with him, but John Maxwell, what did he always challenge us to do? Add value to every person's life. When I go speak places, listen, I take every one of them important. I mean, I spoke over 100 times last year. And so, and that was just in my first 7 months here. And so, or 6 months. And my point is that with that, I would always ask this question as I prepared. How can I bring the greatest value to your life? You know, you've got to be able to remember some of those great leadership things that other leaders have taught you. And that's one thing John Maxwell is just known for. He is always talking about adding value to another person's life.
No question, Ronnie. Well, you know, Ronnie, you've been one of those, as I alluded to, and as we wrap up, that I've called when I was contemplating the next big thing. And I kind of thrived on that. What's the next big thing? What's the next? And you've certainly done some next big things. Hello. So, but one thing I've learned, and I was asked by a group last time last time it was kosher to have a large group, but a large group of kindred spirits, leaders from all kinds of professions, but motivated, and of course, faith is an important part of our life. So, but they said to me, Doc, what is the next big thing? What's the next big thing? And I've always been excited to tell them some next big thing. But Ronnie, I honestly had to look at them and say, you know, at this stage of my life, let me tell you what I've learned. I've learned that instead of worrying about the next big thing is to capture the moment.
That's right.
If I get this moment right with you guys, if I value you, if I think you're a 10, if I think you're a big deal, if I lean into the moment, you know, then if I capture those moments, whether it's a podcast or whether it's somebody helping with the baggage at the airport, or the lady that cleans the hotel room, or the waiter. I mean, in other words, if I value those people, and wherever I am, you know that great saying, wherever you are, be there. And so I've learned that if I get the moments right, the next big thing will come. If I string those moments together and I do them right, then I got a string of pearls. But if I hurry through and run through and I'm on my way to the next big thing and miss the people and maybe even the purpose, then so I've done a little course correction in my own mind and heart. I still love big things and believe vision attracts reality, as I said, but I've just learned, boy, let's capture the moments. And Ronnie, you know, so much I wanted to talk to you about. We're going to do another podcast. What's happened in succession there at the Church of the Cross, Pinnacle Hills, and with Nick, your son. And by the way, that coaching gene, I don't think fell too far from the tree, because you got quite a coach in your family, as well as pretty gifted young leader who's doing a great job pastoring. So we want to talk, we'll do another one at your convenience on succession and those transition moments that are so critical, because you've epitomized it, you've lived it, and I know you're proud of Nick, and well, you're proud of your family as well. You should be. Yeah. But I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Jay, and it's been a real honor to be with you. I'll close with this because I think this is so appropriate to what you talked about a moment ago. You know, we're at a time in America today that the church must answer this moment. We cannot excuse the moment. We have to answer this moment. I believe also, Jay, I learned this when I left Cross Church. 32 years, 7 months, pouring into thousands and thousands and thousands of people every week. And those last few weeks, I learned it. And I didn't learn it until then because I live fast. It's not always good to live fast. And, but I learned this. When people come up to me, and I said bye to thousands of people. Well, last Sunday I was there. I mean, we brought the church together and we did it in Bud Walton Arena where the University of Arkansas plays basketball. My point is this. My point is when people came to say goodbye to me for weeks, we were there 6 weeks after I resigned. You know what they talked about? They talked about two things. My relationship with them and the moments we experienced together.
Wow.
And I think as I was leaving, I kept thinking, I wonder, well, I wish I would have worked on that more. And I obviously must have done it semi-well.
Right.
They mention it. But people may never forget moments. And you know, God is the one who creates those moments. And things happen that only can happen because something's at work beyond you. So I'm grateful for every moment. I'm grateful for this opportunity today. Thank you for all who have listened, and really would encourage all of you to do the very best you can to let this podcast help you become the leader that God wants you to be in your life.
Thank you, Ronnie. Dr. Ronnie Floyd, thank you for what you're doing, what you mean, and thank you that whenever the stakes are high, you lean in, and I'm very grateful. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, Jay.